Please welcome CEO for Direct Travel, Christal Bemont, and Global Director of Travel for Microsoft, Eric Bailey, in discussion with Skift Senior Hospitality Editor, Sean O'Neill.
So Christal has a grand vision for corporate travel. In April, her travel management company, Direct Travel, was acquired by Steve Singh and a group of other investors. If you don't know who Steve Singh is, you can open up your Skift Live app and go to the Ask Skift chatbot, and you'll get the full detail. But the short version is he's a force for reform in corporate travel. Right alongside Christal, they work hand in hand, and Christal is going to explain their idea of the perfect trip at Direct Travel. And Eric wears two hats at Microsoft. One is he's overseeing how Microsoft employees buy travel at one of America's largest buyers of travel. But he also has an eye on how Microsoft's technology, especially AI, might help improve the whole ecosystem. So Christal and Eric, thank you so much for joining us for this.
Thank you for having us.
So Christal, I'd like to start with you. What are the key pain points and frustrations that road warriors and travel managers have today?
Well, I can probably ask everyone in this room the key pain points of road warriors. It's difficult to travel. It has a lot of disruptions, and I'm not talking about things that we see in nature. It hasn't gotten any easier for years and years and years. And so corporate travelers in particular, they have a job to do. They're there to go represent the companies that they serve. And it's very difficult to do that sometimes, and it takes a lot of time away from their families. And so, everything from air, hotel, car, that's 3 components, but there's a whole bunch of other things that starts at the time you think about booking a trip to the time that you come home to your family. And we believe that there are a number of those things, that those chasms need to be branched. And from a travel manager standpoint, it's a difficult job balancing cost in an organization, the complexity of travel and safety of the travelers. And it's kind of like I refer to it as Stretch Armstrong. I'm dating myself in that you feel pulled in 2 different directions. And all of this comes down to a very antiquated and just a fragmented architecture that doesn't allow for an experience, as we've heard that word, to be very fluid, predictive, or personalized. And so we think there's huge, huge gaps, and we're here to try to help solve some of those.
Cool. Now, Eric, you've prepared a slide internally for Microsoft to try to explain to executives the corporate travel landscape. Maybe if we could bring that little slide up. What is it about how corporate travel's landscape is frustrating for you as a corporate travel buyer?
Well, the ecosystem is rather challenging. And this is just the data flow, right? So the data that you put into your booking tool goes to your agency, goes to your GDS, goes to TSA, goes to foreign government. I mean, the airlines, all these different places. Managing that data is one of those things that we have to really focus on, right? Because data privacy is a top concern for us. And when I look at this, I've actually got one that shows the dollars. Now, that's all approximate because nobody knows how many dollars go back and forth between all these companies. Maybe some people have little insights here and there. But I think just trying to figure out how we can make change in a world that is so complex, that has this person being paid here and this data going here and this going there. That's why all these things that we know how to do, that we have the technology, that we should be able to do today, haven't happened yet.
Cool. So Christal, you had made a point about legacy technology, and one thing that Direct Travel does is it uses open cloud-native tools in a tech stack. That conversation sort of reminds me of something that we heard earlier in June at Skift's Data and AI Summit. We're going to play a video clip in a moment on this. There was a speaker from Amex GBT, Marilyn Markham, and she made an interesting point, I think. Hopefully we can cue the video. Okay.
When the offer comes back, it is not automatically sent to the traveler, it is presented to the agent. And that is a game changer because as an agent, you want to be a counselor. We call them travel counselors. But actually, today they do a lot of transaction. Yeah. If you give them an offer and a request and they get to scrutinize it and groom it and actually just tailor it, they go back into the role of a counselor to see, is this connection going to work? Would I wake up at 5 a.m. for this flight? And do all of that extra work that is counsel, and then be able to say, I approve this offer and send it through.
So Christal, does the sense of like marrying service to tech echo with you at Direct Travel?
100%. It's look, I think there's the perception that technology answers everything. It doesn't, but it should be a massive enabler to helping personalize, helping automate, helping predict. And so I think it's this marrying, this careful combination of knowing when someone needs service and being able to really enable your agents, your advisors, your counselors to be there when people need them. And that careful balance of how do you leverage technology to really serve all of our constituents, the travelers, the travel managers, even the suppliers. Suppliers are trying to get connected to the end travelers so they can really personalize an offer. So it's critical that we think about how it's an enabler, but not a replacement of, because I think there's nothing worse than when you really need someone that they're not there to pick up the phone. All the other times, technology should be an enabler and a personalized component or agent.
Okay. So there are other players that are also on this wave of change that Direct Travel has, but I'll use them as an example. And while I'm talking, maybe we can have some, maybe there'll be some visuals in the background of this. But what Direct Travel's offer is it's marrying service plus tech. And so they're giving travel agents superpowers. They're giving them tools from a couple of different companies, booking from a company called Spotnana, expense management from a company called Center, tools for meetings and events from a company called Troop. Yep. And so by putting this together, you're able to help the agents be somewhat more savvy. Is that a fair assessment?
It was perfect.
Okay,
that was great.
excellent.
Yes,
All right.
That's right. And I think using AI and auto AI in particular and other AI tools that'll allow people to really be better at their jobs and really have that personalized experience. You had mentioned, what did a travel manager, for example, what are some of the frustrations? One of the things that I heard last week from a group of travel managers is they spend about 40% of their time just answering questions about the travel management program, about what's on an FAQ, what's approved, what's not approved. And I said, well, what would you do with 40% of your time if you had that back? Because I see what Eric does in his company as a strategic asset of the company and something that's really important to be plugged in a strategic way. So this is the enabler for that.
Cool. And so there are, Eric, Microsoft has its eye on AI and its potential. What do you think is the role that AI could play in helping with corporate travel?
I mean, I think it adds some of the logic that a good travel counselor or travel agent adds to it. So if I asked anybody here, well, A, who could make a booking? That's a rhetorical question, because any of you've all booked airline tickets, right? You don't need an agent to call into on that. But there's certain circumstances where you might need a little bit of help. And computers, if I look in the sort of the past, pre-AI, 300 is always cheaper than 302. But they're really the same for anybody in this room. And so we're showing people connecting flights for $300 instead of a nonstop for 302. And in the past, that's been something that you had needed an agent to sort of take that interpretation. And I think that you'll get the AI that'll build logic in there. It'll look at your preferences. It'll look at what you've done before. Simply knowing if somebody is in Seattle, I know which carriers they're more likely to fly versus if they're based in Minneapolis or in Dallas. So, that's a simple thing that we're not taking into account. And simply by knowing that, we'll be able to offer logical offers.
Cool. Is Microsoft using CoPilot? Is it like piloting or testing or have concepts that would maybe possibly bring this to corporate travel?
Well, we've tried some stuff internally. That ecosystem's a big issue to fight.
Right.
But I think even within our finance organization, 85 or 90% of people are using CoPilot.
Okay.
So every employee is trying to use it.
Cool. I would like to maybe call for a slide that shows like the largest travel management companies that we have. So to Christal's point, some companies in the space focus especially on service, some focus especially on tech, and then there's a few that are trying to make a crossover in the marriage. So Amex GBT, it bought Agencia a couple years ago, so that's going from service to tech. Navan recently, a tech company recently bought Reed and Mackay, which is sort of giving it a service element. But several other players are still sort of they're still open in one space or the other. And then there's the question of moving to open cloud native technologies and having everything be seamless. Sustainability is another issue that I think is of real importance to many business travelers and stakeholders. So Microsoft has a big commitment on climate change. How does that impact your, the travel management?
I mean, it's a key factor. In fact, right now I've even got some funding to put the investment in sustainability above investment in bringing down prices, right? That the first thing we should look at is sustainability. And so, there's 3 areas that we look at there. One is just the reporting, which we have to do. We've been doing that for 15 years, showing sort of what the carbon footprint is. The next one is that awareness to our travelers. Let people understand what that footprint looks like. Make them feel, ideally, a bit of guilt, a bit of shame when they're making these choices. But at least they understand it. And try to visualize that in a way that says, what does 300 kilograms of CO2 look like? It's not easy, but we're trying to figure out some ways to do that. And then the third one, the ultimate goal, is how do you reduce that carbon footprint? How do you have fewer planes fly to get people places? How do you have hotels that are more efficient and they get rewarded for being more efficient? The more efficient airlines will be rewarded for doing that. Because the others are just kind of dressing on the top. The real meat of this is how do we have less carbon? Because that's what the real goal is. It's not about saying we have less carbon, it's about having less carbon output.
Mm-hmm. And so in 2009, Deloitte estimated that Microsoft was the 8th largest buyer of airline tickets among corporate travel buyers. You're not at that level now. Have you guys made some progress in shifting the share of how much air is internally? Or?
We travel a lot less than we did.
Okay.
We travel less than we did 15 years ago, and we're a much bigger company. And that's in absolute terms, not inflation adjusted, nothing like that. Our carbon footprint is less than it was in, I think, about 2005, 2006, something like that, on the travel side.
Oh, cool. That's very impressive.
Yeah.
So, Christal, when you talk about some of the opportunities, you blamed sort of legacy tech as one issue, but another thing that's out there is a lot of suppliers want to sort of have more control over merchandising their content. Some of our my airline reporter colleagues have talked about this with executives. How does that impact travel management and the suppliers wanting to have more?
Well, look, I think it's important for suppliers to have access and be able to deliver, their merchandise and lots of different personalized offers. And I think our obligation, the way that we see this just from a sustainability standpoint, is we look at providing the access to the information that exists within the suppliers to make sure that people know that they can make smart choices, just like you're referring to. And then, how you act and behave inside the company is also important. So we have a sustainability officer, we have a direct impact program, and we think about our actions are very important. But look, I think here's what I'll say to your specific question. We each have a responsibility and a role to play in this entire ecosystem, whether we're talking about sustainability or bridging the gap with data. And I think the foundation to this is the antiquated architecture and the fact that we have to innovate. And that's exactly what, if you have the opportunity and you can have a growth thesis or a mindset, you have to innovate in a way that solves the problems that really haven't been touched for a very long time. And it starts with having an open architecture, cloud native, that allows not just us, not just Eric to solve the problem, but for us to come together to solve these problems, because it won't be done just with one of us or two of us. It will be through an industry. And that starts with us having an open, platform that allows people to develop in and with you. And so that's just a mindset, that's a philosophy, and that's what we believe. And data is a really critical part of this. And so, I think there's multiple complex aspects to this, but it's a really important kind of mindset to have, and that's the way that we look at the world.
Cool, that's helpful. If anyone has audience questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them. Some people already have, which is great. You worked at Concur previously, so you and Steve Singh have known each other for a long time. You were Chief Revenue Officer there. He has had a vision of the perfect trip, he calls it, for some time. But it has also been something that's been discussed for a long time. Yeah. So where are we on the journey towards a perfect trip? Or is there something that's changed now that you feel is an accelerant?
It's kind of like having a house. You're never really finished with the house. You're always doing something in the house. This is a living, breathing thing. The perfect trip is a philosophy that it never stops. You never stop trying to make something better, the experience better, the outcomes better, remembering why someone's making the trip in the first place, How do you support the people that are back at the company that are trying to make sure that these folks are safe? So the perfect trip is an evolution that never stops. And just like we've heard and seen, the world is changing in terms of the tools that are available to help us achieve the perfect trip. So what was possible when I was back at Concur is far from what's possible now. And so our ability to derive outcomes with the perfect trip have just exploded exponentially. But it's only possible if you really believe that the problems that you want to solve are solvable, and you can start plugging some of these new technologies in. We're on a journey, and it will be an evolution, and it'll be I think there's no better time to be here in this world right now than what we have ahead of us. But it's not going to come overnight, but it's really exciting to see what's possible now.
Cool. So Eric, when you think of a Microsoft employees trip or you travel yourself, what is a perfect trip for you? Are things like productivity and
Yeah, and productivity is always going to be top. And there's the search process and the buying process, but it's really on the trip. And if you think of the number of searches you have to do, and by the way, nobody ever wants to search. Nobody should ever have to search. We should just find, right? And ideally, these things would be delivered to you. And I'll just give the example of, and this is a small one maybe, but a bunch of small ones added together make a big one. Getting to the airport, from the airport to here yesterday, well, I landed at the airport and I was going here, so that's a known. I see there's a question maybe about Outlook, right? So those are actually both in my calendar, these things. How do I get from the one to the other? And if I look from a carbon footprint, from a timing perspective, and I actually found the lowest carbon footprint was on the train, the fastest was on the train, the cheapest was on the train. So I ended up taking the train, it was super easy. But like that sort of a thing coming to me, as opposed to people going, I'm not sure, I'll just go get a car. And I think those things coming to you. Right? Yeah. I think the other one too is that if I look at something like LinkedIn, each of you in this room now, there's somebody in this room that you should meet that you're not going to. And yet you might even know them, you might be connected to them. That's ridiculous, right? We should be finding people, pulling people together, making sure that they're productive while they're here meeting with the people that they need to be meeting.
I've long felt it's been a missed opportunity for LinkedIn to not have like a travel component to its business. And Christal, direct travel through the Spot Nano, you offer a sort of like a nudging on the carbon tool. You can surface
100%.
Like different options.
Yeah, I think the visual cues and making sure that we again, it comes down to data, that data is available through each supplier in terms of making smart choices, absolutely. But I couldn't agree with you more as well, Eric. I think there's this lacking of interconnected data, information, and of the journey. And so there's just so many stops and starts that, even you think about your calendar. Why are we asking all the questions or having to do all the manual work that we have to do when your calendar holds a lot of information or your email holds a lot of information? Why isn't it prompting you? Every other part of our life knows who we are and what we like and our preferences. Why is this still so difficult to have to create so many commands and so much juxtaposition around booking travel and managing travel and being on the trip? It's difficult. And there's a lot of noise still left in that process that just by connecting to systems in an intelligent way is really impactful to a traveler.
Cool. Let's go to some audience questions. So how can the short-term rental market better penetrate corporate travel? For example, at one stage, Uber wasn't a reimbursable expense either. Does either of you want to try that?
I mean, I think that it's good when you need it. I don't need a team of 20 people in bunkhouses somewhere together necessarily. I don't know if that's the best thing from a corporate travel perspective, from a risk perspective and things like that. But we know there's times where people will be using short-term rentals. We know, and I'll give a good example. Somebody was going, they were going to somewhere, I forgot where, in France, okay? And the event that they were going to, everything was sold out for 50 miles around. So they were going to go to a hotel 50 miles away and drive to this event and late night drive back. That's not safer. It's safer for them to be in a short-term rental there. So you just use logic on it. I mean, our travel policy is 2.5 pages long for 120 countries.
I think it's incredible for a company your size to have only 2-page policy, yeah.
Well, because you say do the best thing, make logical choices, use the agency, use your corporate card, and then make the best decision for the company. Because if you give me a 60-page policy, I can do whatever I want. I guarantee it. you can game the system. Right? Yeah.
That's so cool. Thinking about the future, we tend to think about future solutions, but what do you see as the future challenges? I don't know, Christal, you want to try that?
Look, I think it's, I think it's the inability for people either to be able to or to be willing to work together. I don't think this is a one-stop shop on how you solve this. I think this is a kind of threaded problem that is solvable in chunks and in ways that if we come together and work with the, kind of a vision of what the world should look like, then I think it's possible. But I think it's not going to be done just by one group or one way of solving the problem.
Cool. So Eric, does Microsoft ever look at adding a booking tool to Outlook, the email program, thinking of Expedia's origins?
I mean, I do every day, but I've got screenshots 15 years old that show exactly what it would look like. And I mean, there actually are ways that you can do it. You can invite people, and in fact, I think you'll eventually be able to invite a bot that just invited to your meeting, put it onto your calendar invites, and then it'll be able to see all those things and make those decisions.
Interesting.
The challenge from a large corporation perspective, making sure that privacy is respected, making sure that these things are all done in a proper way so that people don't get access to the wrong thing. So that's why it's more challenging to build into a product as opposed to having that functionality that people will be able to build around or having other third parties build into it.
How does it work? This may be amateur question on my part, but how does it work with Microsoft in terms of the AI and CoPilot to keep the data secure? Because, for example, some of the examples that you were using, you were coming in to here and you decided to do the train, but in all that conversation, you're revealing information, so that stays secure within.
Yeah, and there's different ways you can search AI within your corporate tools or within your intranet, and you can also search externally with the internet.
Cool. Very cool.
So.
Eric, where do you see opportunities to move people out of planes and cars?
And I would say Teams would be the easiest thing, but
Microsoft Teams.
I think just finding other alternatives that we all know you can actually grow businesses, and I'm leaving out some knowledge businesses you can. I understand if you need to man an oil rig, you need to get people on the oil rig, right? And you need to fly them there. That's not going to change. That didn't change during the pandemic. But for a lot of knowledge workers, we could go 2 years without traveling at all. We found a very small percent of that travel was actually essential, when I thought it was going to be 20 or 30%, not 2 or 3%. So I think that we've found that we can do that, but I think we also all saw what we missed by doing that. And that the goal moving forward is how do we bring those things that we missed, which was the connections with people. It was not as much as you guys can watch this and maybe enjoy it or not, you're going to enjoy the meeting out there more, right? That's the thing that you miss, because you could do this sitting at your desk at home really easily, but it doesn't mean that there's not value in it. And we need to figure out how to get that value and how to understand the value from the meetings out in those rooms there.
Cool. And so what makes you most optimistic about reforming corporate travel as you take on, this is your first year at Direct Travel?
Look, I think I've had an incredible experience working for an industry disruptor in a very, very positive way. It's probably touched, if not everyone's lives in this room, but many people's lives in terms of making things better, more efficient, and more effective. So it's a joy to work with people who have that kind of mindset and want to, really strive to solve critical business problems that are in many ways selfless, but that we can all take advantage of in terms of, because we all experience this every single day. There's nothing more important than being part of something that has a purpose. And so it's an exciting place to be. And I've been very fortunate to be on this journey with Steve, and it's an incredible time, like I said. So I'm excited. I'm excited to work with people like Eric. These are brilliant people that have amazing experience, and I think it's putting us, all together and solving these problems, and I think there's amazing things ahead.
Cool. Well, that's a good point to end on. Thank you, Christal. Thank you, Eric, for this talk. Appreciate it.
Thank you.